She left without warning, no fight, no breakdown, no explanation, just a note that read, "I need space, don't call me, 24 hours. That's how long she vanished. No contact, no phone signal, no accountability. But betrayal doesn't need a full day. It only needs a window, and she opened it wide enough for someone else to step in. When someone says they need space, what they often mean is they need room to cross lines without being watched. And when they return, they expect you to still be standing there loyal, confused, and afraid to lose them. But I wasn't confused. I understood what silence in love usually hides. It hides a new voice, a new scent, a new choice. It hides a betrayal being justified as a moment of clarity. She came back the next evening, casual, not guilty, not apologetic, just collected, as if she expected to slide right back into comfort. She called it a mental break. I called it what it was, a one-day trial of single life with benefits. She said it meant nothing. But if it meant nothing, why was she gone so long? If it meant nothing, why wasn't I allowed to ask where she went? If it meant nothing, why did it feel like I was suddenly the stranger in our home? I listened, not because I believed her, but because I needed to hear the depth of her lie before I answered with the depth of my truth. I didn't scream, I didn't curse, I didn't beg for details. I simply stood up, walked to the drawer, and handed her the envelope, divorce papers, signed, ready. My silence had already spoken louder than anything I could have said. She froze, not out of regret, out of shock, because the game was supposed to end with me broken, not free. She played with fire, and expected to find me smoldering in self-doubt, but I had already burned the bridge quietly in her absence. This wasn't revenge. This was release. This was choosing dignity over deception. This was walking out while I still had my spine intact. They say love is patient, but love isn't blind. Love sees the truth even when the liar smiles. And real love doesn't survive betrayal disguised as a break. So no, I didn't yell. I didn't ask who it was. I didn't count the hours. I counted the lies, and then I walked away with peace and a signature. Because when someone disappears for a day to cheat, they make their choice. And when they return expecting forgiveness, you hand them a response they never prepared for. Goodbye, permanently. When someone vanishes and calls it a break, they're not seeking clarity. They're creating cover. They want distance, not for reflection, but for permission. People don't need space to love. They need space to lie. Because the moment she stepped away, she wasn't trying to find herself, she was trying to lose me just long enough to pretend I never existed. A real partner doesn't go missing. They don't cut off communication. They don't leave you reading a vague message like it's a riddle while they're somewhere else writing a new chapter behind your back. Give me space sounds harmless, but when it's paired with silence, with no calls, no updates, no boundaries, it becomes a mask. She wasn't asking for time. She was asking for invisibility. She wanted to disappear just long enough to do what she couldn't justify in the light. Because betrayal doesn't always announce itself. It sneaks in during these breaks. It thrives in the gray areas, in the unspoken agreements, in the silence she weaponized against me while I sat home wondering if love had an expiration date I never saw. That one day of absence, it wasn't about space. It was a test, a cruel, calculated test to see how far she could go before I stopped waiting. And the saddest part, I was supposed to forgive it. I was supposed to call it a rough patch, act like her silence was a symptom of stress, and welcome her back without questions. But distance doesn't heal what betrayal breaks. It only deepens the wound, because real love doesn't go missing for 24 hours without leaving a trace of care. She left like she owed me nothing, and came back like I owed her everything. Her break wasn't a pause. It was an exit, temporary, experimental, but fully intentional, And what do people usually do during these breaks? They explore, they test, they taste freedom without consequence. And when it doesn't work out, they crawl back to the stability they once dismissed. That's what she did. She gambled with loyalty and expected me to still play the role of a faithful fool. But I had already connected the silence to the scent of lies. I didn't need proof. I didn't need to check her phone. I didn't need to know his name. All I needed to know was that love doesn't vanish without caring how it feels to the one left behind. Because space doesn't hurt people, but being treated like you're disposable during that space, that's where the real wound lies. She never once checked in, never once said, "I'm okay," never once asked how I was holding up. Because the truth is, she didn't want me to hold on. She wanted me to be gone by the time she got back, so she wouldn't have to face what she did. She underestimated me. She thought love would make me wait. She thought fear would keep me quiet. She thought loyalty meant obedience. But loyalty without limits becomes self-destruction. And I wasn't about to burn myself just to keep the illusion warm. That break taught me more about her than any fight could. Because people show you exactly who they are when they think you're too heartbroken to respond. She called it distance, but it was disrespect in disguise. And by the time she returned, I had already replaced confusion with clarity. Not all betrayals are loud. Some sound like silence. Some look like a missing text, a cold shoulder, a sudden absence wrapped in a sweet excuse. But when the person who claims to love you vanishes without accountability, they're not protecting the relationship. They're testing its limits to see if you'll stay, even after they've already left you in every way that matters. When she walked back through the door, it wasn't guilt on her face, it was calculation. Like someone measuring how much of the truth they need to reveal to still stay in control. She didn't return with tears. She returned with confidence, because she thought I'd do what I always did: rationalize, absorb, forgive. But something in me had shifted during her silence. That day of absence wasn't a break for her alone. It was a window for me too. A window to see clearly how love becomes manipulation when loyalty isn't mutual. She stood there, explaining her vanishing act like it was a coping mechanism, as if betrayal could be dressed in emotional language and passed off as healing. But my silence had grown sharp, because silence in betrayal is not weakness. It's observation, it's calculation, it's preparing an exit without fanfare. I didn't raise my voice, I raised my standards, because I realized something. If someone can disappear on you once, they're capable of disappearing again. And next time, they won't even bother to return with excuses. They'll leave you with a scar and call it growth. I didn't need a confession. Her timing was the confession. The way she picked 24 hours to vanish, just long enough to taste another life, but not long enough to be held accountable, that was the strategy of someone who wanted options, not outcomes. She said she needed air. But she came back wearing a lie, and the stench of that lie filled the room faster than her words did. I watched her talk, not to hear her, but to remember this moment when I chose to leave with my spine, instead of staying with my wounds. There's a kind of strength that doesn't announce itself, it doesn't slam doors, it doesn't scream accusations, it just hands over the truth on paper with a date and a signature. I didn't need closure from her, because I had already closed the chapter the moment she didn't care enough to check if I was breathing while she disappeared. You see, love doesn't vanish for a day. It decays slowly in silence, and one day you wake up and realize you're the only one still fighting for it. So I let her speak. I let her tell the version of the story where she was the victim of her own confusion, but I had no interest in co-authoring that fiction anymore, because when someone disappears for space and comes back with vague apologies, what they're really offering you is the opportunity to betray yourself again by staying. I handed her the envelope, not out of rage, but out of mercy for myself. She looked at it like she was reading a language she never thought I could speak. Finality, decisiveness, self-respect. It stunned her. Not because she didn't see it coming, but because she thought I never had the strength to finish the story on my own terms. But the truth is, you don't need to scream to be powerful. You don't need revenge to feel justified. You don't need proof to walk away when the absence already screamed the truth louder than any affair ever could. She tested the waters, thinking I'd drown in my own doubt. But I was never drowning, I was observing, waiting for the right moment to rise without her. And when you finally stand up, quietly, cleanly, with the weight of betrayal no longer pressing on your chest, you don't just walk away from them. You walk back to yourself, because the strongest decisions are the ones made in silence, not out of fear, but out of clarity. And the loudest goodbye doesn't need to be shouted. Sometimes, it's just an envelope left on the kitchen counter, with your name written in dignity.